If both of you, Ellie and Rob, if you'd just like to give a little opening gambit about what you make and where you come from, that'd be great. Let's start with Ellie.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Ellie. I'm the founder of Caleño Drinks, tropical non-alcoholic spirit. I've got a miniature bottle with me here. We do bigger sizes. You have got, there you go, sneak peek, refresh coming. So I launched Caleño just 2 years ago, and we are all about bringing joy, not drinking. So at times when you want to be alcohol free and you don't fancy a drink, whether you're going sober for a year, a month, you're taking the night off, you're taking a week off, Caleño is obviously perfect for that. And we pair beautifully with tonic. We also work really well with soda and cocktails. On our website, you can obviously get some more inspiration on that.
When you just tell me about the process, so it's a non-alcoholic spirit.
Yeah.
Correct. The one thing that I really liked about Caleño, because I tried a lot at the Mindful Drinking Festival, and where you're stood out in the use of the Inca berry. So tell us a little about how, because that's quite a big factor, it seems, in Caleño.
Yeah, so we use quite a few tropical fruits, Inca berry being the key one. We also use pineapple and papaya, and that really stems from Colombia, so a place that I've taken lots of inspiration from. I went back there when I was working on Caleño and working on the product and actually thinking about what it was going to be. I spent about a month traveling around the country. Now, it's a place that I sort of grew up as a child, so I went there a lot, having family from South America. And so actually for me, it was a labour of love. I wanted to bring some tropicalness into the drink. It's quite different. I love tropical cocktails. So that's really the basis for the drink. And we also use citrus and spice botanicals as well too.
Nice. And that's perfect timing, actually, because Anton's just joined us as well. Adam.
You can call me Anton if you want.
Anton.
Yeah, to most things I've heard, so you're all right.
Yeah,
but
good. How you guys
to Rob, and then because then that goes nicely from a spirit to a beer to a kombucha, and takes us nicely through.
Yes. Hi, Rob.
Hello. How you doing?
Very well.
Tell us about why you created an alcohol-free craft beer, Rob.
Why? It's a good question. So it all stemmed from me having my first kid back in 2014, and stopping drinking alcohol for about 6 months after that, so I could change nappies and give him baths and all the rest of it. But at the time I was a lawyer, and there was a lot of business development, which can also be translated as standing in the pub all afternoon, drinking and talking to your mates. And so I found myself in the pub all afternoon, not drinking alcohol, and not wanting to drink coffee or orange juice or Coca-Cola all afternoon. So I ended up drinking alcohol-free beer, and the options at the time were distinctly unimpressive. And I sort of came to this, there was no hallelujah moment. It was much more of a process. It took me about 18 months to get there. But I suddenly realized that we'd had this craft beer revolution in the UK. And I'm stood in any pub in London, able to buy 14 different styles of beer from around the world in any different strengths that you liked, from 3% to 7% to 10%. But if I wanted an alcohol-free beer, there was only one offering, and it was a not very good lager. So the intention behind Big Drop was to sort of mirror in alcohol-free beer what craft beer had done for alcoholic beer, which was to make it good and also to give people choice. So we've deliberately cultivated a culture of, I really hate the word innovation. It's just terrible, isn't it? But we like to make weird and wonderful beers. So, we've done collaborations with other breweries like hibiscus saisons and raspberry gozas. This is a black IPA that I'm drinking at the moment. So it's not just one style of beer. The intention with Big Drop essentially is let's do craft beer, but in the alcohol-free space.
Nice.
And I would say that really early on, back in 2017, I started to do drinks tastings for pub watches. So it's the place where pubs have to go because the council tells them to learn about all the things to do with licensing. And I started to do beer tastings there back in 2017 and alcohol-free drinks tastings, and they used to run away from me. I'd go, try an alcohol-free beer, and all the beer people they would all run away, and I'd have to shout very loudly, there's one here that won a blind taste test against a full-strength beer, and they would all stop in their tracks and come back. So there is, with all of the brands here, a really strong sense that they haven't just created a new drink in this space, they've created drinks that have defied expectations and the norms and have lifted and made this category possible. And all of them have done that in different ways. But for beer, because people's memory may go to Caliber and things like that, which were bloody awful, it's really important that when these came along, they changed that perceptions. And so, you know, Rob definitely did that with his beers.
Nice.
We just say to people now, if we're doing taste testings, we never say, would you like to try a great tasting alcohol-free beer? Because people say, no, not really. But if you just say, would you like a free beer? You go, oh, yeah, brilliant. Oh, thanks very much. And they drink it and you go, by the way, it's alcohol-free. And they go, oh, now you've blown my mind, you crazy people. So that's
people go, oh no, I'm not alcoholic, and then they realise how wrong that is, and yeah, it's really funny. I love it when that happens. But another drink that's really different that people wouldn't have come across and isn't really an alcohol-free spirit or a beer is kombucha, but it sits in that adult space, and that's where Adam's from, Jarr Kombucha. Tell us about Jarr, Adam.
Yeah, so can you guys hear me okay? I just tuned in, so I want to make sure. So I started Jarr with my friends from Crate Brewery, if you guys know where that is, in Hackney Wick in 2015. And I'm from California originally, so kombucha has been big there for about 20 years now. And I'd sort of seen how the industry grew there and realized that in the UK, kombucha, nobody really knew anything about it and wasn't really interested. It was this weird, funky, sour tea. And when we first started brewing it, the first thing we did was we actually opened a tap room. So it was called Jarr Bar, and we served kombucha on draft. We made cocktails with it. We also served crate beer and cider. But particularly, it was for people who wanted to go out to sort of a warehouse nightclub venue and have something to drink that was non-alcoholic. And that was always our intention from the beginning. And then recently, last year, we partnered up with a Belgian beer brewery called Duvel. And they're quite a well-known Belgian brewery that's been around for about 150 years. And now we sort of tapped into their portfolio to expand kombucha across Europe. So we've always had this connection to beer breweries. And we found that kombucha is just a really nice, complex, non-alcoholic alternative to, sparkling wine or, cider, something like that. And it lends itself really well to those spaces. And there's lots of really good brands out there doing that as well, like Real Kombucha. They've really taken on that occasion of, putting it in a champagne bottle and serving it in Michelin star restaurants. And, there's like 35 different kombucha brands across the UK now. But when we started, there were only 3. So it's definitely a growing industry, and we're seeing lots of non-alcoholic fermented drinks popping up.
And it's worth saying, just to add in, that there's a big difference between the fruity kombuchas you might get in a health food store and the kombuchas that are designed for that nighttime occasion, isn't there, Adam?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And ours is sort of a halfway point. We have flavored kombuchas, and those sell the best, but they're not overpoweringly sweet. Our kombucha is still quite dry and quite sour. And it's designed in such a way that it doesn't look like something you might buy in your organic shop. It looks like something you'd want to have sitting on the table in a fancy cocktail bar. So some of our stockists are like Soho House and Harrods and some high-end stockists, but also lots of restaurants and cocktail bars and places where people would, generally buy a bottle of wine or a beer. And having a kombucha that's designed in such a way, I think it makes it a little bit easier for you to be proud of what you're drinking. But that's changed quite a bit in the past couple of years, as evidenced by what we're talking about.
Well, I did want to ask you a question, Adam, to begin with, because I've written them down. So excuse me looking at my phone.
Okay.
So, kombucha is very much an adult soft drink. I think everyone agrees with that. It kind of fits into that space. when it's fermented, so from my understanding, I have a very, very layman's understanding of kombucha, by the way, and I think that's probably a good thing to come in with to start off with. When I understand when something is fermented, a byproduct can often be alcohol.
Yeah.
So when you make kombucha, does it produce alcohol which you have to then remove to try and bring it back to non-alcoholic, or what is the process of making kombucha? And does alcohol ever?
How do you
get
stop
involved
it getting alcoholic, Adam?
Yeah.
It's actually worth asking that with everybody, actually.
Yes.
Let's start with Adam.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a big secret actually in the world of commercial kombucha brewing. It's not something brewers like to talk about, but to be honest, I don't give a damn, because you can replicate anybody's method, you'll never produce the same kombucha. Kombucha by nature produces alcohol. If you're making it at home and you don't drink alcohol, you need to be aware that it can get up to 1.5%. If you're adding fruit, it can get even higher. So buying a store-bought kombucha is actually safer if you're trying to stay away from alcohol. The way in which we keep the alcohol levels down, because what you're doing is you're fermenting tea, sugar, and a culture of bacteria and yeast. And anytime yeast comes into contact with sugar, it produces alcohol. But we have a method of oxygenation. So basically, we ferment our kombucha now in giant bright tanks. Previously, we used to do it in open top tanks. But what we do is we introduce oxygen, ambient oxygen from the air through like a carbonation stone. And we do that constantly, which basically means that the ethanol dissipates and it keeps the alcohol levels down. So our kombucha is about 0.1%. So actually 0.4% less than a non-alcoholic beer, which is generally around 0.5%. So that's our specific way of doing it, oxygenating. Whereas other kombucha breweries might pair it back with water. They might do a really sour kombucha and then blend it with tea and sugar. There's loads of ways to do it, but authentically producing kombucha and keeping it non-alcoholic, you just want to get as much oxygen in there as possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas Rob, probably, do you use a lazy yeast, Rob? I love that phrase. That's just why I think there should be a t-shirt that says lazy yeast on it.
It's only because I can never pronounce the names of the yeast, so it's just like lazy yeast. But yeah, we use a different method, but we are one of the few brands that don't strip out the alcohol. So the beer is what's called brewed to strength. So it never gets to more than, as Adam says, as a 0.5%. Some are low, but they're never more than 0.5%. And we do that absolutely. Adam said this. Sugar turns to alcohol if you introduce yeast into it. So in beer, you take malted barley and you heat it, and sugars arrive. You add yeast in. The yeast eats the sugar and it poops out the alcohol. And essentially, what we do is that we use a lazy yeast. So it's not very good at converting the sugar to alcohol. And then we also brew it at slightly higher temperatures than you would expect to find during the brewing process, which inhibits that yeast activity even more. So then by the time you get to the end of the brew, basically you've extracted all of the flavor from the malted barley that you're looking to extract as you would do normally, and you can hop it. You see, we get all of our big hoppy pale ales and our dark beers like this that you couldn't do if at the end you had to then strip the alcohol out, because you would lose other aspects of the drink that had been created on that journey. Mm-hmm. And for us, it was quite important to, as I said at the beginning, to try and, because we wanted to make a portfolio of craft beer, we knew that we wouldn't be able to strip out the alcohol if we wanted to do that, because you just wouldn't be able to give the variety. And also the equipment was way too expensive to buy. So it was kind of a fortuitous coincidence that we ended up doing it the way that we did.
Okay.
It's worth saying that 0.5% is alcohol free, and some people go, "Oh no, it's 0.5% of alcohol." That's a trace level of alcohol that you will find in nearly everything. So, like breads can be up to 0.3, and fermented fruit like a banana that's very ripe. You actually make 2 units of alcohol in your stomach every day, which is why we can cope with small bits of alcohol. And even Coca-Cola has 0.05% alcohol in. It's how we extract flavor from things to put into drinks and stuff. So you could drink the beers all night or Caleño all night, and you can still get in a car and drive afterwards. Wow. There wouldn't be any residual alcohol, and the kombuchas as well. So it's probably one of the most popular questions we get asked, which is, have I broken my alcohol-free streak by having 0.5? No.
Yeah. And with spirits then, Ellie, because one of the things that I hear or have been told, again, I don't know if this is actually correct, coming from a layman's point of view, that you make a spirit, and then through some kind of scientific method, which we will not go into, you remove alcohol. How do you make Caleño?
Yeah, first of all, Laura, I love the fact that I learn something new every day from you. I've just learned 2 new facts there. So actually, yeah, it's a good question, because actually that's the way some people can do it. Actually, Caleño's method is quite similar to Adam. Yours with Jarr and Rob, yours with Big Drop. Thank you. Love the little bottle shape there. Yeah, Caleño is actually very similar in that we focus on impact of flavour first. Like how can we use the raw botanicals that we're trying to extract flavour from and get those first and foremost. So we don't, unlike others, get to a full strength spirit and then strip back out the alcohol. I kind of felt just from again, when I first started, from a layman's point of view, I was like, what's the point of that? Like, why? Let's just focus on getting flavors. So actually what we do is we do a kind of slow 2-day distillation process. So like Laura, you referenced, like there will be traces of alcohol in the maturation type stage of some of those. So we use well over 10 different botanicals. So some of those botanicals, i.e. juniper, really, really hard to extract flavor from. Whereas botanicals like lemon peel, really easy. That flavor comes through, you've got to be careful that it's not coming through too much. Whereas others need a little bit of help along the way. So there is some maturation beforehand, and then we distill the ingredients and botanicals for 2 days. We then let very slowly and very carefully, so as to not damage any of the flavors. So we don't get to a super high heat where we think we might be damaging any of the flavors in the process. And then we let them mature for another 2 weeks. So we prefer to use that method rather than creating, because with the alcoholic spirit production, you are a lot of the time kind of buying an alcohol and passing it through botanicals and creating a highly rectified spirit and then watering it down. So this process just means you don't use that level of alcohol and strip it back out, because we find this way you can actually get way more flavour through.
I think what all of these are proving then is that the price point is completely justified. In not that this is big sell pitch in any way, but just in terms of that for me, because again, that's always been a slight question with me, is where does this kind of price come out of thin air? Or they go, well, alcohol's this much, so we can do that. But actually, the process is quite incredible.
The price point for me comes from no kebab on the way home, no taxi, no KFC the following day. Boom! Job done. I'm still better off. Hurrah!
I've got hundreds of questions that I would want to ask you, which I'll probably get in touch individually afterwards.
But if you come to our festival in January, which will be online again, all of these brands will be doing talks like they did in the summer. So do look out on Club Soda's Facebook page, join our email list. Go to the Mindful Drinking Festival. We'll be doing all these talks in far more detail then.